Chapter 1. The blood-stained Arrivalthy carriage wheels had stopped turning an hour ago. But Alara Thorne still hadn't moved. She sat in the velvet-lined compartment, her hands folded tightly in her lap, breathing in the scent of old leather and something darker iron, perhaps, or fear. Outside, the wind screamed through the mountain pass, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers seeking entry. She had paid the driver double to bring her this far, to the edge of the Blackthorn estate, where civilized roads ended and whispered warnings began. He'd refused to go farther. Couldn't blame him. Alara pressed her forehead against the cold window glass. Through the frost-etched pane, she could see the outline of the manor house perched on the cliff's edge, a Gothic monstrosity of black stone and iron spires, its windows dark as missing teeth. Lightning split the sky, illuminating gargoyles that seemed to twist their heads toward her. She was 26 years old, recently widowed under circumstances that had made her a pariah in London society, and she had nowhere else to go. The letter in her reticule had promised sanctuary, employment even, a position as archivist to a reclusive nobleman who valued privacy above all else. It hadn't mentioned that Lord Kieran Blackthorn was a vampire, but Alara had learned that detail 3 days ago, from a tavern keeper who'd crossed himself when she mentioned her destination. The woman had gripped her wrist with surprising strength, and whispered, "The Blackthorn house doesn't employ. It feeds." Alara had come anyway. The alternative, returning to London, to the scandal, to the creditors and the whispers about her husband's death, was a slower kind of dying. At least here, if death found her, it would be swift. She gathered her courage and her single trunk, and stepped out into the storm. The wind tried to tear her cloak away immediately. Rain lashed her face, cold and sharp as needles. She stumbled forward, her boots sliding on wet stone. Following the narrow path that wound upward toward the manor's iron gates, they stood open, waiting. No one opens gates in a storm, she thought, but her feet carried her through them anyway. Into a courtyard choked with dead roses and creeping ivy. Stone angels wept like in tears. The manor loomed closer, its massive oak doors carved with symbols she didn't recognize, spirals, and crescents, and what looked like drops of blood. Alara raised her hand to knock. The doors swung inward before her knuckles touched wood. Warmth spilled out candlelight, the scent of old books and something sweeter, like pomegranates. A figure stood in the entrance hall, perfectly still, watching her with eyes that caught the light like a cat's. "Miss Thorne," he said. His voice was cultured, quiet, carrying easily over the storm. "You're late." Alara's breath caught. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, dressed in black, save for a white cravat that made his pale skin seem luminous. Dark hair fell to his collar, rain-damp, framing a face that was beautiful in the way that ancient statues were beautiful, cold perfection, carved from marble and moonlight. But it was his eyes that held her, gray as winter seas, ancient and knowing, and utterly without mercy. The roads were difficult. "My lord," she managed. "Lord Blackthorn," he corrected, though something flickered in his expression, amusement, perhaps, or irritation. "And you are precisely 4 hours, 17 minutes late. The sun sets at 4:30 in these mountains. I specified that you arrive before dark. I didn't realize that vampires are punctual." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Or that the roads between here and the valley are watched by those who would very much like to know who visits my estate." Alara's mouth went dry. Watched by whom? The Crimson Court. He stepped back, gesturing for her to enter. "House Sanguis, to be precise. They've been hoping to catch me in a moment of weakness for 3 centuries. Hiring a human assistant gives them ideas." She should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn, to flee back down the mountain, to take her chances with London's cruelty rather than this beautiful, terrible creature's hospitality. Instead, she stepped inside. The doors closed behind her with a sound like a crypt ceiling. The entrance hall was vast, vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Walls lined with portraits of pale, severe faces that seemed to follow her movement. Candles burned in iron sconces, their flames steady despite the wind that had followed her inside. A grand staircase swept upward, carpeted in midnight blue. Lord Blackthorn moved past her, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. He walked like water flowing, each movement precise and unhurried. "Your quarters are in the east wing," he said, without looking back. "You'll find them adequately furnished. The library is on the 2nd floor, that's where you'll work. Your duties begin tomorrow at sunset." "And during the day?" Alara asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. He paused at the foot of the staircase, one hand on the newel post. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. During the day, Miss Thorne, you may do as you please. Walk the grounds, explore the house, read. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. Just stay away from the North Tower. That door remains locked. For your protection, not mine. Protection from what? From learning things that would make it impossible for you to leave. The words hung in the air between them. Heavy with implication, Alara lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly, despite the fear coiling in her stomach. And if I wish to leave now? For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he crossed the distance between them in 3 fluid strides, faster than any human could move, and stopped close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin. Then I would let you go, he said softly. But we both know you won't. You came here because you have nowhere else. Because whatever scandal chases you is worse than the monster before you. He reached out, his fingers hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. I can smell your desperation, Miss Thorne. It's quite intoxicating. Alara forced herself not to flinch. I came here to work, of course. He withdrew his hand, the mockery fading from his expression. What replaced it was something harder, tired, perhaps, or resigned. Then work you shall, Mrs. Holloway will show you to your room. Dinner is at 9, though I won't be joining you. I've already dined. He turned away, dismissing her. Lord Blackthorn? He glanced back, one dark eyebrow raised. Thank you, Alara said quietly. For the sanctuary. Something shifted in his ancient eyes, surprise, maybe, or pain. Don't thank me yet, Miss Thorne. The night is very long in these mountains. Then he was gone. Vanished into the shadows so completely she might have imagined him. Alara stood alone in the vast hall, her wet cloak dripping onto marble that had witnessed centuries of secrets. The candles flickered, somewhere deep in the house. A door closed, and Alara Thorne realized, with perfect clarity, that she had just stepped into a world from which there might be no return. Chapter 2. The architecture of Silensealer awoke to silence so complete it felt like pressure against her eardrums. And no birds sang outside her window. No servants moved through the halls. Even the wind that had screamed through the mountain pass last night had died to nothing, leaving the manor wrapped in a stillness that felt ancient and watchful. She sat up slowly, disoriented. Pale sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, painting her room in shades of amber and dust. The bed she'd slept in was enormous, its posts carved with the same strange symbols she'd seen on the front door, spirals within crescents, drops that could have been tears or blood. The linens were fine, but old, smelling faintly of lavender and thyme. Someone had unpacked her trunk while she slept. Her few dresses hung in the wardrobe, her books arranged on a shelf beside the fireplace, where embers still glowed. A silver tray sat on the writing desk. Tea, bread, butter, jam. Still warm. Alara's skin prickled. She hadn't heard anyone enter. She dressed quickly in a simple gray wool dress, twisted her dark hair into a knot, and ventured into the hallway. The east wing was a study in Gothic extravagance. Oil paintings lined the walls, landscapes of mountains under blood-red moons, portraits of aristocrats with Kieran's same pale beauty and cold eyes. The carpet runner muffled her footsteps. Doors stood closed on either side, their brass handles tarnished with age. She found the main staircase and descended, one hand trailing along the banister. The wood was smooth as glass, worn by centuries of hands, human hands, vampire hands. She couldn't tell. The entrance hall looked different in daylight. Less menacing, perhaps, but more melancholy. Dust motes drifted through shafts of weak sunlight. The portraits she'd barely glimpsed last night now revealed themselves fully. Men and women in clothing spanning centuries, all sharing that same ethereal beauty. That same knowing sadness in their painted eyes. The Blackthorn line, a voice said behind her. Alara spun. A woman stood at the base of the stairs, elderly, human, dressed in severe black bombazine, with a ring of keys at her waist. Her face was lined but kind, her gray eyes sharp with intelligence. Mrs. Holloway, Alara guessed. Indeed, miss. I manage the household. She inclined her head politely. I trust you slept well? Yes, thank you. Though I didn't hear you bring breakfast. Long practice, miss. His lordship values quiet during the day. The house learns to move softly, Mrs. Holloway gestured toward a doorway. If you've finished breaking your fast, I can show you to the library. Alara followed her through a maze of corridors, each more elaborate than the last. They passed a music room where a pianoforte stood draped in dust covers, a conservatory choked with dead plants and terracotta pots, a dining hall with a table long enough to seat 30, but set for one. Does Lord Blackthorn have no other guests? Alara asked. Not for many years, miss, and staff. Surely you don't manage this entire estate alone? Mrs. Holloway's expression flickered something almost like pity. There's a groundskeeper who comes at dawn and leaves before dark. A girl from the village delivers provisions weekly. Beyond that, she paused before an ornate door. His lordship prefers solitude. The living make him uncomfortable. The living. As if Kieran himself were something else entirely, which, Alara supposed, he was. Mrs. Holloway opened the door, and Alara's breath caught. The library was magnificent to stories of books rising to a frescoed ceiling where painted angels watched over scenes of paradise and damnation. Rolling ladders on brass rails, reading chairs upholstered in worn velvet, windows stretching from floor to ceiling, flooding the space with light that would be blinding to vampire eyes. His lordship won't enter during the day, Mrs. Holloway said quietly. The sun doesn't burn him, but it weakens him considerably, makes him vulnerable. This is your domain until sunset. Alara stepped inside, overwhelmed. Thousands of volumes surrounded her, leather-bound, gilt-edged, some so old the titles had faded to illegibility. She could smell vellum and ink, and the particular mustiness of knowledge preserved through centuries. What exactly am I to do here? She asked. Catalog, organize, preserve. Mrs. Holloway handed her a leather-bound ledger. His lordship has been collecting for over 400 years. The collection has never been properly indexed. You're to create order from chaos, for 100 years. Alara's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the ledger. Mrs. Holloway. What is he? The housekeeper was silent for a long moment. Then, lonely, miss. Terribly, unbearably lonely. Everything else, the power, the danger, the politics of the vampire houses, that's secondary. Remember that. If you remember nothing else. She left before Alara could respond. Alone in the vast library, Alara set down the ledger and simply turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. Sunlight poured through the windows, warming her skin. Dust danced in the golden light. She felt, for the first time since her husband's death, something almost like peace. She could work here. She could lose herself in books and organization and the quiet satisfaction of bringing order to chaos. She could forget, for hours at a time, the scandal that had driven her from London. She could pretend the master of this house wasn't a creature who drank blood to survive. Alara chose a section at random and began. The hours slipped away like water. She catalogued treatises on astronomy written in Latin, poetry in languages she didn't recognize, journals bound in leather so soft it must have been calfskin. Some books felt warm under her fingers. Others sent chills racing up her arms, grimoires she suspected, though she didn't open them to check. When the light began to fade, painting the library in shades of amber and shadow, she finally paused. Her neck ached. Her fingers were smudged with leather, polish, and ink. She'd catalogued perhaps 50 volumes out of thousands. It would take months, maybe years. The thought didn't frighten her. It comforted. You work efficiently. Alara gasped and spun. Kieran stood in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame, watching her with those winter gray eyes. He was dressed differently than last night, simpler, in black trousers and a white shirt open at the collar, revealing the pale column of his throat. His dark hair was tied back with a ribbon. He looked younger like this, less like a lord, and more like a scholar. I didn't hear you approach, Alara said, pressing a hand to her racing heart. No one ever does. He stepped into the library, moving with that same fluid grace. But I knocked 3 times. You were absorbed. The collection is extraordinary. The collection is a monument to insomnia. He ran his fingers along a shelf, not quite touching the books. 4 centuries is a long time to fill. Reading helps. You've read all of these? Most, some multiple times. His gaze met hers, and she saw something rather an ache he hadn't quite managed to hide. When you live forever, Miss Thorne, you learn that stories are the only thing that changes. People, politics, even wars, it all repeats. But stories can still surprise you. Alara set down the book she'd been holding. Is that why you hired me? For company in your reading? I hired you because House Sanguis has been pressuring me to align with them against House Noctis. They believe a human in my household signals weakness, vulnerability. His smile was cold. They're not entirely wrong. Then I've put you in danger. No, Miss Thorne. I've put you in danger. But I find I'm willing to accept that risk. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes. Exhaustion, perhaps, or something deeper. Tell me, why did you really come here? The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. Alar could have lied, should have lied. Instead, she met his ancient gaze and told the truth. Because my husband died in my arms, and London society believes I poisoned him. Chapter 3. Confessions in Twilight. Kieran didn't move, didn't blink. For a long moment, he simply studied her with those ageless eyes, and Alara felt stripped bare, every secret, every wound, laid open under his gaze. Did you? He asked finally. No, but you wish to. Alara's breath hitched. No one had asked her that. Not the magistrate, not the physician, not even her own sister. They'd assumed guilt or innocence, but none had considered the complicated truth between. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. Some days I wished him dead. Kieran moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the dying light. What did he do to you? Nothing that would leave marks. Her voice sounded distant, clinical. Richard was controlled, deliberate. He knew exactly how much cruelty a wife could endure without visible evidence. How to use words instead of fists. How to isolate her from family, friends, anyone who might notice she was disappearing inside herself. And when he died, heart failure. The physician confirmed it, a weakness he'd apparently hidden for years. Alara wrapped her arms around herself. But Richard had been drinking tea I'd prepared. And I'd been reading botanical texts from my father's library. The timing was unfortunate, suspicious. Yes, Kieran turned from the window. In the fading light, his skin seemed to glow faintly, luminous as pearl. You were never charged. No evidence. But evidence isn't required for social death, my lord. Only whispers. She met his gaze steadily. So when your letter arrived, when my solicitor mentioned a position far from London, with a man who valued privacy above reputation, I accepted. Even after I learned what you were. Especially after you learned what I was. Kieran corrected softly. You thought a monster would be more honest than men who hide their monstrosity behind propriety. The accuracy of it stole her breath. Perhaps, she admitted. He crossed the distance between them, stopping just beyond arm's reach. This close, she could see the inhuman stillness of him, no rise and fall of breath, no unconscious fidgeting. He existed in perfect, predatory calm. I won't ask if you poisoned him, Kieran said. Your guilt or innocence doesn't concern me. But I will ask this. Are you running from justice, or from mercy? I don't understand. Justice would have hanged you. Mercy let you flee. His head tilted slightly. Which haunts you more, Miss Thorne? The possibility that you killed a man who deserved killing, or the certainty that you wanted to? Alara's eyes burned. Both, good. Something that might have been approval flickered across his expression. Guilt keeps us human. Or humane, at least. The truly dangerous ones are those who feel nothing. Is that what you are? Dangerous because you feel nothing? Kieran's laugh was unexpected, low, genuine, tinged with something bleak. I'm dangerous because I feel everything, Miss Thorne. 400 years of everything. Every loss, every betrayal, every moment of beauty that crumbled to dust in my hands. He stepped back, putting distance between them. I don't sleep. I don't dream. I simply endure, night after night after night, accumulating memories like scars. The rawness in his voice shook her. This wasn't the cold lord from last night, the creature who'd appeared from shadow like something conjured. This was someone stripped to bone, exhausted, aching, unbearably old. Why tell me this? Alara asked. Because you were honest with me. It seemed only fair to return the courtesy. He moved toward the door, then paused. Also because Mrs. Halloway is right. I am lonely. And loneliness makes fools of even immortal creatures. Lord Blackthorn. Kieran. He glanced back at her. If we're to share truths in twilight, we should at least use names. Kieran, she repeated, testing the shape of it. Why am I really here? Not the political answer. The true one. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because House Sanguis has been hunting me for 3 centuries, and I'm tired of running. Because they believe humans are nothing but cattle, and I needed to prove otherwise to them and to myself. His jaw tightened. And because I read about your husband's death in the London papers. I read about the widow who'd been studying botany, who'd been seen at the apothecary purchasing foxglove seeds, who'd served her husband tea the night his heart stopped. Alara went cold. You think I did kill him? I think you're intelligent enough to have done it, desperate enough to have tried, and brave enough to live with the uncertainty. He met her eyes across the shadowed library. I think you're exactly the kind of person who might understand what it means to be both victim and monster. And I find I need someone who understands that particular duality, because you're both as well. Yes, the admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Outside, full darkness had fallen. Through the window, Alara could see the first stars emerging, cold and distant as judgment. House Sanguis, she said carefully. What do they want from you? Submission, alignment, or failing that, my death? Kieran's expression hardened. There are rules among our kind, laws that govern territory, feeding rights, the creation of new vampires. I broke those laws when I refused to join either house. I claimed these mountains as neutral ground. The Crimson Court views that as problematic. How problematic? The kind that ends in war. He smiled without humor. Your presence here accelerates that timeline considerably. They'll see you as leverage, a weakness to exploit. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. Then why risk it? Because I'm 400 years old, Miss Thorne, and I've forgotten what it feels like to care whether I survive the night. Having someone to protect. He trailed off, something vulnerable crossing his features. It gives me a reason to fight back. The weight of that confession settled over her like snow. I'm not asking you to stay, Kieran continued quietly. If you wish to leave, I'll arrange safe passage back to London. Enough money to start fresh somewhere else. But if you remain, he hesitated. If you remain, I need you to understand, the danger is real. House Sanguis doesn't make idle threats. Alara thought of London. The whispers, the closed doors, her sister's carefully worded letter suggesting she'd be more comfortable somewhere else, anywhere else. She thought of Richard's cold eyes across the breakfast table. The way he'd smiled when she flinched. She thought of this library, filled with centuries of knowledge. Of Mrs. Halloway's kindness. Of Kieran's devastating honesty. I'll stay, she said. Kieran's eyes widened, fractionally surprise, perhaps, or relief. Why? He asked. Alara smiled, small and sad. Because you're right. I understand what it means to be both victim and monster. And perhaps, she met his gaze. Perhaps we both deserve someone who understands that. For the first time since she'd arrived, Kieran Blackthorne looked almost human. Then welcome to Blackthorne Manor, Alara, he said softly. May we both survive what comes next. Chapter 4. The education of Shadowsea days fell into a pattern that should have been comforting, but instead felt like waiting for a storm. Alara woke with the sun, breakfasted alone in her room, and descended to the library, where she worked until the light began to fail. She catalogued books in 7 languages, some describing worlds that no longer existed: Constantinople before the fall, Paris before the Revolution, London before the Great Fire. She found journals written in Kieran's elegant script, spanning decades, but never opened them. Some privacies should remain sacred, even between conspirators and truth-telling. Evenings belonged to Kieran. He would appear as shadows lengthened, moving through the library with that unnatural grace, and they would talk. Not about House Sanguis or vampire politics or the danger creeping closer each night. Instead, they discussed philosophy, literature, the small observations that filled immortal hours. He told her about watching the printing press revolutionize Europe, about hearing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony performed for the first time, about the peculiar loneliness of outliving everyone you'd ever loved. She told him about her childhood in Sussex, her father's botanical work, her mother's death from consumption when Alara was 12, about marrying Richard because he'd seemed safe, educated, respectable, kind in public, about realizing too late that kindness could be a mask worn only for witnesses. He never hit you, Kieran observed one evening, his fingers tracing the spine of a medieval manuscript. No, but he hurt you nonetheless, every day. Alara set down her cataloging pen, with silence, with calculated disappointment, with the slow, methodical dismantling of everything I thought I was. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Then, I had a wife once, 230 years ago. Alara's breath caught. He'd never mentioned this. What happened to her? She grew old. I didn't. His voice was carefully neutral. I turned her at her request, when she was 43. She'd wanted immortality, wanted to stay with me forever. But the turning, it doesn't preserve who you are, Alara. It reveals who you truly were beneath the mortal constraints. And who was she? Cruel. The word fell like a stone. The humanity she'd performed for mortal eyes, the gentleness, the compassion, they were learned behaviors, not innate qualities. Without the fear of death, without the softening influence of aging, she became something monstrous. She fed indiscriminately, killed for pleasure. I spent 30 years trying to teach her control before I finally accepted the truth. What truth? Kieran met her eyes. That immortality doesn't change us. It clarifies us. Everything we are, distilled to its essence and magnified by eternity. Alara understood what he wasn't saying. You're afraid I'll ask you to turn me. I'm afraid I'll want to say yes. The confession hung between them, dangerous and electric. I won't ask, Alara said quietly. Not now. Perhaps not ever. Why? She considered the question carefully. Because I've spent the last year discovering who I am without Richard defining me. I need to know myself as a mortal before I could possibly know what kind of immortal I'd become. Something that looked like relief crossed Kieran's features. Wise. Self-preservation, she corrected. You said immortality clarifies. I'm not certain I'd like what it would clarify about me. You think you'd be monstrous? I think I wanted my husband dead, and he died. That's not nothing. Kieran moved closer, his winter gray eyes searching hers. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you. Alara Thorne. I see someone who endured years of systematic cruelty and emerged with her compassion intact. Someone who reads botanical texts for pleasure and treats books with reverence. Someone who thanked an elderly housekeeper for bringing breakfast and didn't flinch when I admitted I'd researched her tragedy before offering employment. That doesn't make me good. It makes you human, complicated, capable of both darkness and light. He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were cold, but surprisingly gentle. You think monsters are born from wanting bad men dead? I think monsters are born from not caring who dies in the pursuit of power. There's a difference. His touch lingered for a heartbeat longer than necessary before he withdrew. Alara's skin tingled where his fingers had brushed. Kieran, what happened to your wife? After you realized what she'd become? His expression shuddered. I killed her. The admission was delivered without inflection. But Alara heard the grief beneath it, old pain, carefully buried. Never quite forgotten. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. It was mercy in the end. She'd become something that couldn't be saved, and I'd created her. The responsibility was mine. He turned away, shadows pooling around him. But I learned my lesson. I've never turned another human since. Never allowed myself to become attached. Until now? The question escaped before Alara could stop it. Kieran went very still. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Until now, outside, an owl-called lonely sound in the vast darkness. The library felt suddenly smaller, the space between them charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. You should know, Kieran continued, still not looking at her. House Sanguis sent a messenger 3 nights ago. They're coming to inspect my household, to verify that I'm maintaining proper protocols regarding human staff. Alara's stomach dropped. When? 10 days. Perhaps less. Now, he did turn, and his expression was grim. They'll try to frighten you. They'll offer you money, protection, escape, anything to undermine my claim that humans can coexist with vampires as equals rather than prey. What do you need me to do? Show no fear. Answer their questions honestly. And, he hesitated, stay close to me when they arrive. The old laws forbid harming another vampire's claimed human without cause. If they believe you're under my protection, they can't touch you. Claimed? Alara's pulse quickened. It's a legal distinction, nothing more. A declaration that you're under my guardianship, but something in his eyes suggested it meant more than that, something he wasn't quite willing to name. And if I refuse the claim, then you become fair game. Kieran's jaw tightened. House Sanguis doesn't waste opportunities, Alara. An unclaimed human in my household would be seen as proof that I don't value mortal life. They'd kill you to make a point. The casual brutality of it stole her breath. Then claim me, she said, lifting her chin. Do whatever's necessary to keep me safe. It requires blood. Of course it did. Alara extended her wrist, steady, despite the fear singing through her veins. Then take it. Kieran stared at her offered wrist as if it might burn him. You don't know what you're agreeing to. I know I trust you more than I trust them. That's enough." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Kieran crossed the distance between them and took her hand in his, cradling it like something precious. "Not tonight," he said softly. "When House Sanguis arrives in front of witnesses, that's when the claim must be made." His thumb brushed over her pulse point, feeling the flutter of her mortal heart. "But I promise you, Alara, I will keep you safe." Chapter 5. Blood and Boundary. As the night House Sanguis arrived, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Alara felt at the moment the sun set a cold that had nothing to do with winter and everything to do with predators circling. She stood in her room, hands trembling, as she fastened the buttons of her best dress, a deep burgundy silk that had survived her hasty departure from London. Mrs. Holloway had laid it out without being asked, along with a note in careful script, where read, "It shows you're not afraid of blood. Practical advice from a woman who'd survived decades in a vampire's household." Alara twisted her hair into an elegant knot, pinned it with her mother's silver combs, and forced herself to breathe. Through her window, she could see torches approaching up the mountain path, a procession of carriages, their lanterns burning green, an unnatural color. A warning, a knock at her door. "Come in," she called. Expecting Mrs. Holloway, Kieran entered instead. He was dressed formally tonight: black coat, silver waistcoat, cravat pinned with an onyx that seemed to absorb light. His dark hair was tied back severely, revealing the sharp angles of his face. He looked every inch the ancient lord, cold and untouchable, but his eyes, when they met hers, were warm with concern. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I can still send you away. Mrs. Holloway knows routes through the mountains that House Sanguis doesn't watch, and leave you to face them alone?" Alara shook her head. "No," he agreed, claimed human, legal protection. "I won't run. They'll try to break you. Let them try." She moved to stand before him, lifting her chin. "I survived, Richard. I'll survive this." Kieran's expression softened fractionally. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small silver pendant on a delicate chain, a crescent moon cradling a drop of red stone. "Wear this," he said, moving behind her to fasten it around her neck. His fingers brushed her nape, cold and careful. "It's an old symbol. House Blackthorn's sigil. It tells them you're mine to protect. Mine." The word sent heat through her, despite the chill in the air. "Kieran," she said as he stepped back, "what exactly does a blood claim entail?" He was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I'll take blood from your wrist. Not much, a few drops. It creates a bond, temporary but binding. For 30 days, you'll carry my scent. Other vampires will know you're claimed. It prevents unauthorized feeding. And after 30 days, the claim must be renewed or released." His jaw tightened. "The bond itself is harmless. You might feel my presence more acutely, know when I'm near, sense my emotional state in extreme circumstances. Nothing invasive, nothing that compromises your autonomy, but it can become more," Alara guessed. "If renewed repeatedly, over years, yes, the bond can deepen, become permanent." He met her eyes. "I won't let it go that far. One renewal, perhaps two, until House Sanguis loses interest. Then I'll release you from the claim entirely." Alara touched the pendant at her throat. "And if I wanted it to deepen?" Kieran went very still. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because I'm 400 years old, and you're 26. Because every human I've cared for has died or been destroyed. Because I won't trap you in immortality, and I can't bear another mortal lifetime watching someone He stopped himself, turning away. Because it would end badly. It always ends badly." The pain in his voice made her chest ache. Before she could respond, a bell tolled downstairs, deep, sonorous, summoning them. "They're here," Kieran said. His mask of cold control slipped back into place, transforming him into the remote lord once more. "Stay close to me. Speak only when directly addressed. And remember, they feed on fear. Show them nothing." He offered his arm. Alara took it, feeling the unnatural cold of him through layers of fabric. Together, they descended. The entrance hall had been transformed. Candles burned in every sconce, filling the space with flickering light that cast dancing shadows across the portraits of Kieran's ancestors. Mrs. Holloway stood near the door, her expression carefully neutral, hands folded at her waist, and in the center of the hall stood 3 figures that made Alara's breath catch. They were beautiful the way winter was beautiful, crystalline, perfect, deadly. 2 men and a woman, all pale as moonlight, all dressed in shades of crimson and black. The woman stood slightly forward, clearly the leader. She was tall, slender, with hair like spun copper, and eyes the color of fresh blood, those eyes fixed on Alara with predatory interest. Lord Blackthorn, the woman said, her voice like honey over broken glass. How delightful to finally visit your mountain sanctuary. And you've acquired a pet. Kieran's arm tensed beneath Alara's hand, but his voice remained calm. Lady Ravenna, welcome to Blackthorn Manor. May I introduce Miss Alara Thorne, my archivist and companion. Companion. Ravenna smiled, revealing teeth to white, to sharp. How quaint. Tell me, Miss Thorne, has Lord Blackthorn explained the terms of your employment? He has, my lady, Alara said, keeping her voice steady. And you're content to serve a creature who could drain you dry without effort? I'm content to work for a man who treats me with more respect than any mortal ever has. The words hung in the air, dangerous and defiant. Ravenna's smile widened. She moved closer, circling Alara like a shark. Pretty words. But let's speak plainly, shall we? You're here because you have nowhere else to go. London society cast you out. Your own family won't speak your name. You came to Kieran not out of choice, but desperation. Lady Ravenna, Kieran said, his tone edged with warning. I'm simply establishing facts. Ravenna stopped directly in front of Alara, close enough that Alara could see the inhuman stillness of her no breath, no heartbeat, nothing alive behind those crimson eyes. You're a scandal, a potential murderess, a woman with nothing to lose. And Kieran expects us to believe he's protecting you out of, what, altruism? He expects you to honor the old laws, Alara said quietly, which state that a claimed human is inviolate. Ravenna's eyes flashed. You're not claimed yet. Then let's remedy that. Kieran moved to stand beside Alara, his presence solid and reassuring. Unless House Sanguis intends to violate protocol by interfering with a formal claim. Not at all. Ravenna stepped back, gesturing graciously. Please, proceed. The other two vampires moved closer, forming a loose circle. Witnesses, Alara realized. The claim had to be public to be binding. Kieran turned to face her, his gray eyes searching hers one final time. Are you certain? His expression asked. Alara extended her wrist in answer. Kieran took her hand gently, cradling it between both of his. He drew a small silver blade from his coat, ceremonial, she thought, ancient and beautiful. With infinite care, he pressed the blade to her wrist, just above the pulse point. By blood I claim, he said, his voice formal. By law I protect, by honor I bind. Alara Thorne, do you accept Blackthorn's guardianship? I do, she whispered. The blade cut a sharp sting, nothing more. Blood welled, dark and red against her pale skin. Kieran bent and pressed his lips to the wound. The sensation was nothing like she'd imagined. No pain, no violation. Instead, warmth bloomed where his mouth touched her skin, spreading up her arm and into her chest. She felt him, truly felt him for the first time. The weight of his loneliness, the depth of his careful control, the fierce protectiveness that wrapped around her like armor. When he lifted his head, his eyes had darkened to storm gray. A single drop of her blood stained his lower lip. It's done, he said quietly. She's claimed. Ravenna's smile was sharp as knives. Indeed, how touching. Chapter 6. The siege begins. Blood bond settled over Alara like a second skin. She could feel Kieran now. Even when he stood across the room, a cool presence at the edge of her consciousness, steady as a heartbeat she'd never had. It should have frightened her, this sudden awareness of another being. Instead, it felt oddly comforting, like discovering she'd never been as alone as she'd believed. Ravenna circled them slowly, her crimson eyes assessing. The claim appears legitimate, she said, her tone suggesting disappointment. Though I confess surprise, Kieran. You've avoided bonding for 2 centuries. Why now? Why her? House Blackthorn's choices require no explanation to House Sanguis, Kieran replied coolly. His thumb brushed over Alara's wrist where the small cut had already begun to heal faster than natural, she noted. A side effect of the bond. Everything requires explanation when it threatens the balance of power. Ravenna gestured to her companions. Lord Cassius. Lady Morwenna. Your assessment? The male vampire stepped forward, tall, angular, with eyes like chips of ice. He inhaled deeply near Alara, sending her. The bond is fresh, but genuine. She carries his mark. His gaze flicked to Kieran. Though the claim is weak, surface level, easily broken if she chose to leave. I won't, Alara said, before she could stop herself. Cassius's eyebrow arched. Bold, foolish but bold, he leaned closer, dropping his voice to a whisper meant only for her. Do you know what he is, little mortal? Not just vampire. Kieran Blackthorn is kinslayer. He murdered his own wife when she displeased him. Ice flooded Alar's veins, but she held Cassius's gaze. He told me himself. Unlike some, he doesn't hide his sins behind pretty lies. The words landed like a slap. Cassius's expression darkened. Careful, Miss Thorne, Ravenna purred. Insulting House Sanguis is unwise, claimed or not. Accidents happen in these old manors. Crumbling stone, unstable floors. A human could fall so easily, and I could declare blood feud for any harm that befalls her, Kieran said, his voice deadly quiet. Is that truly what House Sanguis wants? Open war over a human archivist? The temperature in the hall dropped another degree. Ravenna's smile never wavered, but something predatory shifted in her eyes. Of course not. We came merely to verify certain rumors. To ensure you haven't violated the compact. The compact prohibits unauthorized creation of new vampires and feeding on unwilling humans, Kieran said. I've done neither, yet. Lady Morwenna spoke for the first time, her voice soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more threatening. She was younger looking than the others, perhaps 16 when turned, with golden hair and rosebud lips. But you've created a bond. Bonds lead to attachment. Attachment leads to the offer of immortality. We've seen this pattern before. My personal affairs become house affairs when they destabilize neutrality. Ravenna moved to the center of the hall, commanding the space like a queen holding court. You claim these mountains as neutral territory, Kieran. Neutral requires not choosing sides. But House Noctis has been sending you letters, offering alliance, offering protection. Alara felt Kieran's surprise ripple through their bond before he controlled it. How do you know about Noctis's correspondence? He asked carefully. We have our sources. Ravenna's smile widened. Just as we know about the human woman who fled London under suspicious circumstances, the widow whose husband conveniently died, the botanist who studied poisons. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. They'd investigated her thoroughly. What's your point, Ravenna? Kieran's hand found Alara's, squeezing gently, warning her to stay silent. My point is that you've become predictable. You collect broken things, broken books, broken humans, broken vows. You sequester yourself in these mountains and pretend the world below doesn't exist. But House Noctis grows stronger every year. They control Paris, Vienna, half of the Eastern territories. If they move against House Sanguis, your neutrality becomes meaningless. You'll be forced to choose. I'll choose survival, Kieran said, as I always have. Will you? Ravenna drifted closer to Alara, studying her like a curiosity in a museum. Or will you choose her? Because that's what House Noctis is counting on. They sent those letters knowing we'd learn of them, knowing we'd come here. They want to force your hand, make you declare loyalty or face isolation. Then they'll be disappointed. I declare loyalty to no one, except her. Ravenna reached out as if to touch Alar's face. Kieran moved faster than thought, placing himself between them. Don't. The single word cracked through the hall like a whip. Ravenna laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. There it is. The attachment you claim doesn't exist. You'd fight me, an elder of House Sanguis, over a mortal woman you've known less than a fortnight. I'd fight anyone who threatens what's mine. The possessiveness in Kieran's voice sent heat through Alara, despite the danger crackling in the air. Through their bond, she felt his fury, cold, controlled, absolute. Proof, Cassius said from behind them. He's compromised. The human has made him weak, or strong enough to finally take a stand. Morwenna tilted her head, considering. Perhaps House Sanguis has underestimated Lord Blackthorn's strategic value. A vampire willing to die for a human might be exactly the symbol House Noctis needs. Enough speculation. Ravenna raised her hand, and her companions fell silent. Here's our offer, Kieran. Send the girl away. Dissolve the bond. Return to true neutrality. In exchange, House Sanguis guarantees your territory remains protected when war comes, and war is coming, whether you acknowledge it or not. And if I refuse, then you'll be considered an enemy of House Sanguis. Your lands forfeit. Your name struck from the registry of neutral houses. Ravenna's expression hardened. And your precious human will be fair game for any vampire who wishes to test whether Lord Blackthorn's protection extends beyond these walls. The threat hung in the air. Unmistakable. Alara felt fear spike through her chest, but also something else, anger. She was tired of being used as leverage, as proof of weakness, as a pawn in games she hadn't chosen to play. No, she said clearly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Miss Thorne, Kieran began. No, Alar repeated, stepping out from behind him to face Ravenna directly. You don't get to dictate the terms of my life. Not you. Not House Noctis. Not anyone. I chose to stay. I chose this bond. And I'll be damned if I let ancient vampires threaten me into running like a frightened child. Ravenna's eyes widened, fractionally surprise, perhaps, or recognition. For a moment, she looked almost approving. You have spirit, she said softly. That's rare in mortals these days. Most are so breakable. Test me and find out how breakable I am. The words were reckless, suicidal even. But Alara was done being afraid. Ravenna studied her for a long, tense moment. Then she laughed, genuine this time, delighted. Oh, Kieran, she said, turning to him with something like pity in her crimson eyes. You're more doomed than I thought. She's magnificent. She swept toward the door, her companions following like shadows. You have 7 days, Ravenna called over her shoulder. Send her away, or prepare for war. Choose wisely. Then they were gone, the great doors slamming shut behind them with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Alara's legs gave out. Kieran caught her before she hit the floor, sweeping her into his arms. Through their bond, she felt his terror, not for himself, but for her. Pure, overwhelming fear that he'd just condemned her to death. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair. God, Alara, I'm so sorry. I should never have let you stay. Should never have claimed you. Don't, she managed, wrapping her arms around his neck. Don't you dare apologize for the only honest thing that's happened to me in years. He carried her up the stairs. To the library, where books and lamplight created the illusion of safety. But the illusion was breaking, war was coming, and Alara Thorne had just declared herself willing to burn in its flames. Chapter 7. Ashes and Alliance. Kieran set Alara down in the library's largest armchair and immediately paced to the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. Through their bond, she felt his emotions roiling, anger at House Sanguis, fury at himself. And underneath it all, a terror so profound it made her chest ache. You shouldn't have spoken, he said, his voice tight. Ravenna respects power, not defiance from mortals. You've made yourself a target. I was already a target the moment I arrived here. Alara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Despite the fire crackling in the hearth, she couldn't seem to get warm. At least now they know I won't be easily intimidated. They know you're reckless. Brave, yes, but also willing to challenge vampires who've existed for centuries. Kieran turned from the window, and his eyes were bleak. Bravery without power is just another word for suicide. Alara, then give me power. The words escaped before she'd fully thought them through. But once spoken, she didn't take them back. Kieran went very still. What are you asking? Teach me. Alara stood, crossing to where he stood, haloed by moonlight. You said House Sanguis feeds on fear. Then teach me not to be afraid. Teach me your world, the laws, the politics, the weaknesses. If I'm going to be caught in this war, I refuse to be helpless. Knowledge won't protect you from creatures who can move faster than you can think, but it might help me survive them. She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his heart, silent, still, no beat beneath her palm. You told me you needed someone to protect. Let me be someone worth protecting, not a victim, not prey, a partner. Through their bond, she felt his resistance warring with desperate hope. You don't understand what you're asking, Kieran said quietly. The vampire world is built on cruelty, on hierarchies of power and force through blood and violence. Learning its rules means accepting its brutality. I watched my husband die in my arms, possibly by my own hand, and London society called me a murderess without trial. I already know brutality, Kieran. I just need to learn how to fight back against the immortal version. Something shifted in his expression, resignation, perhaps, or admiration. 7 days, he said finally. Ravenna gave us 7 days. I'll teach you what I can. But Alara, it won't be enough. Nothing I teach you will make you their equal. I don't need to be their equal. I just need to be dangerous enough that killing me has consequences. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're already dangerous. You just don't realize it yet. He moved to the library shelves, running his fingers along spines until he found what he sought, a leather-bound tome so old the title had faded to illegibility. He set it on the reading table between them and opened it to reveal pages filled with elegant script and disturbing illustrations. This is the Codex Noctis, Kieran said, written by the first vampire lords when they established the house system 600 years ago. Everything you need to know about our kind is documented here: our origins, our laws, our weaknesses. Alara leaned closer, studying a page that showed a vampire recoiling from a silver blade. Is it true? Silver burns you? Silver disrupts our healing. A wound from a silver blade takes days to repair rather than hours. His finger traced the illustration. But it won't kill us. Only 3 things can truly destroy a vampire: decapitation, burning to ash, or starvation. Starvation? Without blood, we deteriorate. Slowly, painfully, over months. Eventually, we lose coherent thought and become little more than starving animals. His expression darkened. House Sanguis uses starvation as punishment for those who violate the compact. They lock transgressors in silver cells and let them waste away. Alara shuddered. That's monstrous. That's vampire justice. Kieran turned the page, revealing a diagram of what looked like territorial boundaries. This is the current house system. Sanguis controls the Mediterranean, most of Western Europe. Noctis holds the East Russia, the Balkans, parts of Asia. There are smaller houses Umbra in the Americas, Tenebris in Africa, but Sanguis and Noctis are the true powers. And you're caught between them. By choice. I claimed these mountains 200 years ago when both houses wanted them as strategic positions. I made myself too costly to dislodge, too useful as a buffer between territories. Neutrality was my protection. Until it wasn't. Alara studied the map, noting how the mountain range did indeed sit directly between Sanguis and Noctis territories. Ravenna was right. If war comes, you'll be forced to choose or be destroyed. Yes, then we choose neither. Alara met his eyes. We survive on our own terms. Kieran's laugh was bitter. Against 2 houses that have existed for centuries, we'd last perhaps a week, unless we had something they wanted more than these mountains, such as... Alara turned to another page in the codex, this one showing an ornate ritual circle. What's this? Kieran's expression shifted, surprise mixed with wariness. Where did you learn to read Old Latin? My father taught me. Botanical texts were often written in Latin. What is this ritual? He was silent for a long moment. Then, it's the rite of vassalage. A ceremony where a lesser vampire swears eternal loyalty to a house in exchange for protection and power. It's binding, unbreakable, except by death. Have you ever sworn vassalage? No, that's why I'm neutral. I've never bound myself to any house. Alara studied the ritual, her mind racing. But if you did, if you swore to one house, the other would have to withdraw their claim to these territories. House law, yes? No interference with a vassal's sworn lands? In theory. Kieran's eyes narrowed. But vassalage is eternal. Alara, I'd be bound to serve that house for the rest of my existence. I'd lose my freedom, my autonomy, everything that makes this life bearable, unless you had leverage. Something valuable enough that the house you swore to would grant you unusual terms. What leverage could possibly? Kieran stopped, understanding dawning across his features. No, absolutely not. Why not? I'm exactly what both houses want to prove their point. House Sanguis wants you to send me away to demonstrate that humans are beneath vampire concern. House Noctis wants you to keep me to prove humans and vampires can coexist. Either way, I'm leverage. You're also mortal, fragile. One wrong move and I'm dead either way if we do nothing. Alara placed her hand over his again. Kieran, listen to me. We offer House Noctis a deal. You swear vassalage in exchange for protection of these lands and the right to maintain a human companion without interference. You become their symbol, the vampire lord who proves humans and immortals can work together. It's exactly what they want to use against House Sanguis. Through their bond, she felt him turning the idea over, looking for flaws. House Noctis would demand concessions, he said slowly. Military support when war comes. Strategic intelligence. Possibly my presence at their court. Can you accept that? Can you? His gray eyes searched hers. If I swear to Noctis, you become part of that oath. You'd be bound to their service as surely as I am. Your freedom would be as compromised as mine. Alara thought of London, of Richard, of every choice that had been made for her rather than by her. At least it would be my choice, she said quietly. And I'd rather be bound alongside you than free and alone. Kieran closed his eyes, something that looked like pain crossing his features. You say that now, but eternity is a long time to regret a decision made in desperation. Then don't make me immortal. Keep the bond temporary. Keep me mortal. She squeezed his hand. But let me help you survive this, please. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled through the mountain pass. Finally, Kieran opened his eyes. I'll contact House Noctis, he said. Feel out their terms. But Alara, if this goes wrong, if they reject our offer or demand more than I can give, then we face House Sanguis together and hope 7 days is enough to learn how to survive. That's not a plan. That's faith. Alara smiled, sad and fierce. Sometimes faith is all we have. Kieran pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest like she might disappear. Through their bond, she felt his fear and his hope warring too. Impossible emotions for a creature who'd lived 4 centuries trying to feel nothing. You're going to destroy me, he whispered against her hair. Or save you, Alara replied. There's really only one way to find out. Chapter 8. The reckoning letter arrived on the 5th night. Delivered by a raven with eyes too intelligent to be natural, Alara watched from the library window as the bird landed on the sill, a sealed envelope clutched in its talons. Kieran approached slowly, his expression unreadable, and took the letter. The raven cawed once a sound like laughter and vanished into the darkness. House Noctis had responded. Well? Alara asked, though through their bond she already felt his tension ratcheting higher. Kieran broke the black wax seal and unfolded parchment that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His eyes moved across the page, and she watched his jaw tighten with each line. They'll meet with us, he said finally. Tomorrow night. Neutral ground, the ruins of St. Theodora's Abbey, 10 miles north. That's good, isn't it? They're willing to negotiate. They're willing to hear our offer. That's different. Kieran set the letter on the table, his fingers lingering on the paper. House Noctis doesn't negotiate from weakness, Alara. They'll expect concessions that go far beyond what we discussed, such as my complete loyalty, military service in their coming war with Sanguis, and, he hesitated, they want to meet you. Assess whether you're worth the political cost of protecting. Alara's stomach dropped. They'll test me, in every way they can without technically violating the claim. Kieran turned to face her, and his expression was bleak. House Noctis prides itself on civility, but don't mistake that for kindness. They'll probe for weakness, fear, any sign that you're not committed to this alliance. If they find it, they'll reject the offer and leave us to House Sanguis. Yes, Alara moved to the window, staring out at the mountain darkness. Tomorrow night, she would stand before ancient vampires and convince them she was worth protecting. That immortal woman fleeing scandal had value beyond being a pawn or a meal. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. Teach me, she said, turning back to Kieran. We have 1 day. Teach me how to face them without showing fear. For the next 20 hours. Kieran transformed from protector to instructor. He taught her the formal greeting rituals, the specific angle of a bow when addressing vampire nobility, the careful dance of eye contact that showed respect without submission. He drilled her on House Noctis's history, their founder, Constantine the Wise, who'd established their territories through strategic alliance rather than conquest. Their current matriarch, Lady Selene, who was rumored to be over 800 years old and had never lost a political negotiation. Don't lie to them, Kieran said, as afternoon light filtered through the library windows. He sat across from her, patient, despite her fumbling attempts at formal vampire etiquette. Noctis values truth, even uncomfortable truth. If they ask about your past, about Richard, about why you came here, answer honestly. Even if honesty makes me look weak, especially then. They'll respect vulnerability acknowledged more than strength fabricated. He reached across the table, taking her hand. And Alara, when they offer you a way out, refuse it. What do you mean? They'll test your commitment. Probably offer you money, safe passage, a new life far from vampire politics. They'll make it sound reasonable, compassionate even. A way to escape before things become irreversible. And if I accept, then they'll know you're not truly committed to this alliance. That you're looking for an exit. They'll reject our offer, and we'll be left with nothing. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But if you refuse their mercy, if you insist on staying despite the danger, that's when they'll believe you might be worth the investment. Alara absorbed this, her mind racing. They're testing whether I'm strong enough to survive their world. Yes, then I'll show them I am. Kieran's expression softened. You already have strength, Alara. You've survived things that would have broken others. But their world requires a different kind of strength, the ability to stand in a room full of predators and remember you have value beyond being prey. Did your wife have that strength? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kieran went very still. No, he said quietly. Catherine wanted power. She thought becoming immortal would give it to her. But power without purpose is just cruelty with better manners. He met Alara's eyes. You're different. You don't want power for its own sake. You want agency, choice, the ability to determine your own fate. Is there a difference? All the difference in the world. As sunset approached, Mrs. Holloway appeared with clothing a gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer with trapped starlight. Simple, elegant, expensive without being ostentatious. For meeting house noctis, the housekeeper said, laying it across the bed in Alara's room. They appreciate beauty, but distrust excess. This should strike the right balance. Alara touched the fabric, marveling at its softness. How do you know so much about vampire politics? Mrs. Holloway's expression grew distant. I've served Lord Kieran for 40 years, miss. I was 20 when I came here, running from a husband who used his fists to make his points. His lordship offered me sanctuary, just as he offered you. Over the decades, I've learned to read the patterns, how to survive in a world that wasn't built for people like us. Why have you stayed so long? Because Lord Kieran never asked me to be anything but human. Never tried to change me, own me, or diminish me. She met Alara's eyes. That's rarer than you might think, even among mortals. Especially among mortals. After Mrs. Holloway left, Alara dressed carefully, pinned her hair with silver combs, and fastened Kieran's pendant around her neck. The crescent moon felt warm against her skin, pulsing faintly in time with their bond. She looked at herself in the mirror, a widow turned archivist turned. What? Vampire's companion? Political pawn? Something else entirely? She looked like someone who'd decided to stop running. Kieran was waiting in the entrance hall, dressed in black save for a silver waistcoat that matched her pendant. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, hunger perhaps, or wonder. You're beautiful, he said simply. I'm terrified. Yes, but you'll do it anyway. That's what makes you remarkable. He offered his arm. Ready? Alara took a deep breath, feeling the bond between them pulse with shared determination. Ready? They walked out into the night together. The carriage ride to St. Theodora's took an hour, winding through mountain passes where mist clung to ancient trees. Neither spoke, but through their bond, Alara felt Kieran's steady presence, a calm certainty that whatever happened, they would face it together. The abbey ruins rose from the mist like broken teeth. Once grand walls now crumbled to rubble, arches opening onto empty sky. Moonlight painted everything in shades of silver and shadow. 3 figures waited among the ruins. The central figure was a woman who made Ravenna look like a child playing dress-up. Lady Selene stood nearly 6 feet tall, regal as a queen, wrapped in robes of deepest purple. Her hair fell white as snow to her waist, her skin luminous as pearl. But it was her eyes that held Alara violet, ancient, knowing, eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. Beside her stood 2 guards, massive vampires in dark armor, their hands resting on sword hilts. Lord Blackthorn, Selene said, her voice rich as velvet. How kind of you to accept our invitation, Lady Selene. Kieran bowed, and Alara followed his lead. Thank you for meeting with us, of course. Though I confess curiosity about your proposal. Those violet eyes shifted to Alara. And about the mortal who has inspired such unprecedented action from our reclusive mountain lord. Alara lifted her chin, meeting Selene's gaze directly. Despite her hammering heart, Miss Alara Thorne, she said clearly. At your service, my lady. Selene smiled, an expression that held centuries of secrets. We shall see, she said softly. We shall see. The negotiation had begun. Chapter 9. The price of freedom. Lady Selene moved through the abbey ruins like water through stone, fluid, inevitable, ancient. She circled Alara and Kieran slowly, her violet eyes, assessing every detail. The pendant at Alara's throat, the protective way Kieran stood slightly forward, the invisible thread of their bond humming in the night air. A blood claim, Selene observed. Fresh, less than a week old, I'd wager. She stopped before Alara, tilting her head. Tell me, child. Do you understand what you've agreed to? I understand that Lord Blackthorn has offered me his protection in exchange for my service, Alara said, keeping her voice steady, and that the bond allows him to fulfill that promise. Service, Selene's lips curved. How delightfully ambiguous. What exactly do you do for our mountain lord, Miss Thorne? I catalog his library, organize 4 centuries of accumulated knowledge, and that requires a blood bond? No, but surviving House Sanguis's threats does. One of the guards shifted, hand tightening on his sword hilt. Celine raised a finger, barely a gesture, and he stilled. Sanguis has been pressuring you, Celine said to Kieran. Ravenna paid you a visit, I presume? 5 nights ago, Kieran confirmed. She demanded I dissolve the bond and send Miss Thorne away. When I refused, she gave us 7 days to reconsider or face consequences, and instead of capitulating, you contacted House Noctis. Celine's smile widened. Bold, desperate, potentially brilliant. You wish to offer vassalage in exchange for protection of your territory and your companion. Yes, my lady. Vassalage is eternal, Lord Blackthorn. You would belong to House Noctis until death claims you. Your freedom, your neutrality, your carefully guarded independence all forfeit. Celine moved closer to him, studying his face. After 200 years of proud isolation, why surrender now? Through their bond, Alara felt Kieran's hesitation. The truth was dangerous, but Celine would detect any lie. Because isolation has become imprisonment, Kieran said quietly. Because I've spent 2 centuries proving I need no one. And I'm tired of the loneliness. That proves. Because. His eyes flicked to Alara. Because some things are worth the cost of freedom. The words hung in the cold air, heavy with meaning. Celine's expression shifted, something almost like approval. How refreshingly honest. And you, Miss Thorne? What do you gain from this arrangement? This was the test. Alara felt it in her bones, in the way Celine's ancient gaze pierced through every defense. Safety, Alara said. Purpose. A chance to build something that matters instead of hiding from what I've lost. You lost a husband. Under suspicious circumstances, if rumors are accurate. They are. Richard died after drinking tea I prepared. I'd been studying botanical toxins. Society assumed the worst. And were they correct to assume? Alara's heart hammered. Kieran had warned her. Truth, even uncomfortable truth. I don't know, she said. I wanted him dead. I'd researched methods. But I don't remember putting anything in his tea that night. I think I didn't. But wanting something badly enough, hating someone deeply enough, it makes you doubt your own memories. Celine studied her for a long, tense moment. Then she laughed, genuine, delighted. Oh, you're perfect, she said. Ravenna must have been furious. She expects humans to be either cowering victims or arrogant fools. You're neither. You're, she considered, honest about your own monstrosity. That's rare. I'm not a monster, Alara said quietly. No? You potentially murdered your husband and fled rather than face justice. You've bound yourself to a vampire, knowing it could lead to your death or worse. You stand before House Noctis offering yourself as a political pawn. Celine leaned closer. That's not monstrosity, child. That's survival at any cost. And in our world, survival is the only virtue that matters. Alara forced herself not to step back. Then you'll accept Lord Blackthorn's offer? Perhaps. But first, I have questions. And you will answer them truthfully, or this negotiation ends. Celine gestured to a fallen pillar. Sit. This may take some time. Alara sat, feeling cold stone through her silk gown. Kieran moved to stand beside her, a silent presence of support. Question 1, Celine began. If I offered you money, a new identity, safe passage to America, where neither House Sanguis nor House Noctis holds territory, would you take it? The escape Kieran had warned her about. No, Alara said. Why not? Because I'm tired of running. Because starting over alone means carrying all my ghosts with me. Because, she met Kieran's eyes. Because I'd rather face danger with someone I trust than safety with strangers. Celine's expression was unreadable. Question 2. If Lord Blackthorn swears vassalage to House Noctis, you become part of that oath. We could command you to perform tasks, attend our court, serve our interests. Your life would no longer be entirely your own. Does this trouble you? My life has never been entirely my own. First, my father chose my education. Then my husband chose my days. Then London society chose my reputation. Alara lifted her chin. At least with House Noctis, I'd know the terms of my servitude up front. That's more honesty than I've received from any mortal authority. Question 3, and this one is crucial. Celine's voice dropped, dangerous and soft. Lord Blackthorn will not remain mortal forever, even if he never turns you. Eventually, you will age while he remains unchanged. You will weaken, sicken, die, and he will endure. Can you accept that your bond has an expiration date measured in decades, not centuries? Alara felt Kieran tense beside her. Through their bond, waves of old grief and newer fear. I can accept it, Alara said slowly, because the alternative is refusing connection out of fear of loss. I'd rather have 30 years of partnership than an eternity of safety without meaning. Celine straightened, her expression shifting to something grave. Final question, Miss Thorne, and answer carefully. Do you love him? The question struck like lightning. Alara's breath caught. Love? She barely knew Kieran. 2 weeks in his household, a handful of conversations, one blood bond forged in desperation, but through that bond, she felt his loneliness, his carefully controlled hope, his terror at caring for someone again. She felt herself reflected in him, broken, wary, desperately wanting to believe trust was still possible. I don't know yet, Alara said honestly, but I think I could. And that's terrifying enough to make it real. Silence fell over the ruins. Celine turned to Kieran. And you? Lord Blackthorn? Do you love her? I don't remember how, Kieran said quietly. Catherine taught me that love between mortal and immortal ends in tragedy. But Alara makes me want to remember. To try again despite knowing how it ends. How honest you both are about your broken hearts. Celine's smile was sad, ancient. Very well. House Noctis will accept your vassalage under the following terms. You will provide military counsel when war comes. You will allow us to station guards in your territory. You will attend court once per season. And Miss Thorne will be granted protected status as your companion, untouchable by any vampire, mortal or other entity under Noctis's dominion. Relief flooded through Alara. So powerful her hands trembled. However, Celine continued. And ice replaced relief. There is one additional requirement. A test of commitment, if you will. What test? Kieran asked. House Sanguis will not accept this alliance quietly. They'll view your vassalage as betrayal, your protection of a human as weakness. They will come for you, both of you. Celine's violet eyes glittered. You must survive their retaliation. Prove that this bond, this alliance, is worth defending. Do that, and House Noctis will stand with you. Fail, and we die. Alara finished. And you die, Celine confirmed. Alone. Chapter 10. The Shoisith attack came at dawn. Alara woke to the sound of shattering glass and Mrs. Holloway's scream. She bolted upright, heart hammering, still tangled in sheets. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's sudden surge of alarm, distant, weakened by daylight, but urgently trying to reach her. Stay in your room, his presence seemed to whisper. Lock the door. But Mrs. Holloway's scream came again, cut short this time. Alara grabbed the fire poker from beside her hearth and ran into the hallway. The east wing was chaos. Windows along the corridor had been smashed inward, letting brutal morning sunlight flood the passage. Smoke rose where the light hit carpet and wood, not natural sunlight, Alara realized with horror. Enhanced somehow, burning hotter, brighter, alchemical sunlight. Designed to flush out vampires even in their daylight sanctuaries, 3 figures moved through the smoke and lighthouse Sanguis vampires, their faces wrapped in dark cloth to protect their eyes. Their movements jerky and pained in the searing brightness, but still faster than any human. Mrs. Holloway lay crumpled against the wall, blood trickling from her temple. There, one of the vampires hissed, pointing at Alara. The claimed human. Ravenna wants her alive. Alara gripped the poker tighter. Touch me and Lord Blackthorn will destroy you. The vampire laughed, a wet, pained sound. Lord Blackthorn is trapped in the North Tower, little mortal. The sunlight we've conjured is too strong even for one as old as him. He can't reach you, can't save you. Through the bond, Alara felt Kieran's rage and desperation. He was trying to move through the manor, despite the light, burning himself with every step. Don't. She thought at him desperately. You'll die. His response was wordless fury and the sensation of flesh blistering. The vampires advanced. Alara backed toward the staircase, mind racing. She couldn't outrun them, couldn't fight them. But maybe. She threw the poker at the nearest vampire's face and bolted for the library. Behind her, she heard cursing, pursuit. She hit the library doors at full speed and slammed them shut, throwing the bolt. It wouldn't hold long. Vampire strength would splinter the wood in seconds, but she needed time. The library's windows faced east, filling the vast room with morning light. Safe for her, deadly for them. Alara ran to Kieran's desk, yanking open drawers. There had to be something: weapons, defensive talismans, anything the lord of a vampire household might keep for emergencies. Her fingers closed on cold metal. She pulled out a small silver dagger, its blade etched with symbols from the Codex Noctis. The library doors exploded inward. Two vampires stumbled into the sunlit space, smoke rising from their exposed skin. They shrieked, trying to shield themselves, but desperation drove them forward. Ravenna promised golden territory. One gasped, his face already blistering. "Your death earns us." Alara didn't let him finish. She'd learned enough from Kieran to know vampire arrogance was their weakness. They expected humans to cower. She charged. The silver blade caught the vampire across the throat. Not deep enough to decapitate, she lacked the strength, but silver burned. He fell back, clawing at the wound. The second vampire lunged. Alara dodged behind a reading table, using furniture as barriers. The vampire was faster, stronger, but the sunlight weakened him. Each movement left wisps of smoke trailing from his skin. "You can't win," he snarled. "We'll take you to Ravenna. She'll break your bond with Blackthorn and prove to all the houses that humans are nothing but." A section of floor exploded upward. Kieran erupted from the cellar passage below, moving with inhuman speed despite the daylight flooding the room. His skin was blistered and raw, smoke rising from every exposed inch, but his eyes blazed with fury. He moved like death incarnate. The vampire tried to flee. Kieran caught him by the throat, lifted him one-handed, and in a single fluid motion, tore his head from his shoulders. The body crumbled to ash before it hit the floor. The wounded vampire at Alar's feet tried to crawl away. Kieran stalked toward him, movements predatory despite the agony the sunlight must be causing. "Wait," Alara said.